Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is what we call our group learning program, where each Sunday and Wednesday I get together with students, helping them to understand the path to enlightenment. What I do is I start with meditation, guiding you guys in a meditation session, but then afterwards I share a talk from this book titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Each Sunday I go chapter by chapter, and over a 7-month period we cover the entire book. Today we're actually in chapter 19, which is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where you learn about the life story of the Buddha and what motivated him to go on this journey to get to enlightenment. And then also it helps you to be able to understand why you experience difficulties and struggles when you experience sickness, aging, and death for yourself or those close to you. So I'll share that with you guys after the meditation. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys here. Welcome everyone who's joining online as well. If you'd like to join for the meditation, the way that we start this is with some chanting, and you're welcome to chant along if you'd like. We have chanting sheets over there on the cabinet. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to help his students to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So he used chanting as a learning tool, as a learning device. You can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or any of those kinds of things. There aren't any of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. Instead, he taught you to be able to train your mind. So while he used chanting during his lifetime to be able to help his students to remember his teachings, we don't actually need that now. We actually have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, things like this to be able to study the teachings, where they didn't have that 2,500 years ago. So they just used chanting as a way to commit it to their memory. So you can see that this isn't a ritual or a ceremony or prayer or anything like that. So if you choose to chant, you're going to see that it actually helps you, and it helps to ease the mind in the meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you end up getting one of these chanting sheets and you read the English translations, you're going to see that there's a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants himself, because the Buddha wouldn't have walked around and said, "Here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me," right? This would be ego or arrogance if someone chose to do this. This would be putting yourself above others. And by the time that you get to enlightenment, you don't have that. You think of yourself as being equal to everybody. There's not this pecking order in your mind. So if you choose to chant, understand that they probably came from his students, either during his life or after his death, and it's going to help to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Because if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings to this peaceful and joyful mental state that is enlightenment, and this teacher didn't want anything or expect anything from you, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think these came from his students, either during his life or after his death. Once we're in the meditation, I'm going to be providing some guidance, where I'm going to be essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while we're meditating together. Then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating. Everyone here at the temple and anyone joining online will just all meditate at the same time. Now, during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car go by, a dog barking, a bird chirping, someone here might cough or sneeze. This is all normal. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence and you hear a sound, you will cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated. It's actually the mind itself that is causing these feelings. The lack of wisdom that the unenlightened mind has, it thinks that these feelings are being caused by something external. You might think it's your mom and dad or your brothers and sisters and your boss that is annoying you or frustrating you or making you angry. But it's actually your own mind that is causing this. This is why you can eliminate it. You can get to a point where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful because you live in an impermanent world, but the mind craves permanence. So if you're in meditation craving permanent silence and you hear a sound, you will cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated because the world around you is constantly changing. You're not going to be in an environment where it's permanently silent. So if you're in meditation understanding that and you hear a sound, then you understand that the world's working exactly the way it was intended to work, that these sounds are going to arise, they're going to change, and then they're going to fade away. In terms of after that period of quietness, we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand the life story of the Buddha. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times as part of your journey to enlightenment. It's kind of like having a tool belt, and you use these different tools at different times in order to be able to help you on your journey to enlightenment, because your body can't be in the same position permanently. But oftentimes people are learning in the seated position, and that's what they're using to get started. So I'll give you guys some guidance, some suggestions and thoughts about something that could maybe be more comfortable for you to help you get situated for your meditation. But just keep in mind that what I'm sharing with you are just recommendations or suggestions. You can use whatever you like. What's important is that the body's comfortable, not luxurious and not painful, but it's comfortable. You're not training the body here, you're training the mind. So these 4 positions, you can learn them at any time as part of various classes, courses, and retreats, but perhaps you can learn a little bit about the seated position today. And you can use something that I'm sharing with you, or you can use something that you've come up with on your own. Not everybody's going to sit in the same way. So you might be sitting on the floor or in a chair. If you're at home, you might be on a bench or a sofa or in a wheelchair. You can really sit however you like. But if you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will help soften your seat a bit. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do this lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation in the lower body and cause pain. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets their hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it, but it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people might rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. The same thing's true for anybody who's in a chair or a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed, so this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect. With the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched like this, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation, because what meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert so that you can actively train it during the meditation. So having the sternum up and the shoulders back will help you to keep your mind attentive and alert, and it'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting in order to ease into meditation, and then I'm going to come back in with the guidance. So you're welcome to chant along if you'd like. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Potang Mahakawanang Apiwate Ami. Savakato emahakewata tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano emahakewato Sawaka sangho Sanghang namami Namo rasa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa Namo rasa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa Namo rasa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa Iti piso emakawa arahang sama sammuto Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokawitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusrang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมาเควาพุทธังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This individual who we refer to as the Buddha figured out 2,500 years ago how to be able to get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all the causes and conditions that are producing things like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this can be eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. As I was sharing previously, that people oftentimes think that it's the outside world that's causing these feelings, but it's physically impossible for someone to insert a feeling into your mind. It's the mind itself that is causing these feelings. And you learn this through the very first teaching of the Buddha in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And you can get to a point where you train your mind that you don't experience them anymore. You uproot the causes and conditions that are producing those feelings. And you can see that this is gradually occurring as you're making your way closer and closer to enlightenment, because there'll be certain situations that you know that you normally get angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed, and you'll be in those same situations and you no longer experience that. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll notice that your mind has focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. The mind will be performing optimally by the time you're experiencing enlightenment. And you'll notice all your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, that they're at ease. Because in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of bitterness, harshness, and hostility in your mind. And when you're putting that out in your relationships, it's causing harm, and therefore harm is coming back to you. And oftentimes people feel justified in their bitterness and harshness and hostility because they think it's the other person that's causing it. But in reality, it's your own mind that's causing that. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not doing those kinds of things anymore, where you can be loving and kind and warm and gentle with all the people around you. And because of this, all your personal and professional relationships will really be blossoming. You'll notice that you can't even be in a bad mood any longer by the time you get to enlightenment. So what I do here is I help students to be able to understand this path of how to train your mind to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And we're at a point in this program where we're actually exploring chapter 19. Chapter 19 is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. The reason why it's titled this way is because in the unenlightened state, life can feel pretty difficult. But by the time you get to enlightenment, that's not the case. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's no more struggles. There's no more difficulties. When you're in the unenlightened state, there'll be a lot of struggles and difficulties that you'll be encountering on a day-to-day basis. But you can overcome that by training your mind, and where life it can be completely at ease and comfortable. There's no longer struggles and difficulties. So in this particular chapter, I share the life story of the Buddha. And sometimes people ask me, they say, why is it that you waited all the way to chapter 19 to be able to share the life story of the Buddha? Should it not have been like chapter 1? Well, the reason why it's chapter 19 is because during the lifetime of the Buddha, people asked him, they said, what's the best way for us to respect you? And he said, well, if you're interested in respecting me, it would be wise to learn and practice my teachings. If you learn and practice my teachings, that's the very best way to respect me. So knowing this, the whole first part of the book, I focus on sharing the teachings of the Buddha that are going to help you to get started and to be able to transform your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. And then by the time you get to chapter 19, I start sharing his life story to be able to help you understand a bit about his life, because it is helpful to understand his journey to enlightenment and certain things that he encountered on the way, because it's going to help you in your journey to enlightenment. So this sickness, aging, and death are situations where a human being typically has a lot of difficulties and struggles in their day-to-day life. You might experience whether it's your sickness, aging, and death, or the people around you that are close to you. And these were motivators towards helping the Buddha to be able to go on this journey to enlightenment. So I'm going to share with you this life story of the Buddha, and then I'm going to open up to any questions that you guys have related to his life story. The way that I've organized this talk is into these sections, where I'm going to share his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, and his teaching career. And we're ultimately going to circle back and talk about the sickness, aging, and death, and why you experience so many difficulties and struggles during that period of time. Now, normally when I'm teaching, I will teach for like 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. I'll teach another 15 or 20 or 30 minutes and open up for questions. But with this particular topic, I found that it's best to just teach the entire life story of the Buddha and then open up for questions at the end. So that's what I'm going to do today. When we get to the question period, if you have questions, we have microphones here in the white bowl in the center of the room. We also have some up here as well. If you would like to ask a question, just get a microphone, take it back to your seat, press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on, and you can hold this up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these microphones with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that'll be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. For anybody who's online, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, if you have questions, you can put that in the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So this individual who we refer to as the Buddha, he started out as Siddhartha Gotama. That was his name. He wasn't a Buddha when he was born. He was an individual just like you and I. He's a human being. He was born into a royal family. His mother was a queen. His dad was the king. He was the firstborn son. He was the one in line to be able to become the king. And when he was born, his mother was having difficulties with his birth. At this particular time frame, if you were pregnant as a woman, they would normally allow you to go back or take you back, kind of organize a way for you to get back to your homeland where it is that you grew up, so that way you could give birth among your family. So the king and the queen living together, he organized a caravan to be able to take his wife back to her homeland, to where she grew up, so that she could give birth with her parents and her siblings and her cousins and aunts and uncles and people like this, to be able to help her as part of giving birth. So this caravan was making its way back to her homeland, and in the process of traveling, she actually went into labor. And when she went into labor, they actually had to pause the traveling, and she got out of the caravan and she went over to this tree, and she was holding on to this branch of the tree, trying to deliver the baby. The baby was having difficulties coming out of the birthing canal, so it ends up coming through the side of the stomach. And because of this, she ends up dying 7 days later, where today we would have just done a C-section and she would have been just fine. Siddhartha Gautama was born in 563 BCE in a place that we refer to as Nepal. So the technology to save her life didn't exist, so she ended up dying 7 days after the birth. And because this wasn't uncommon, that sometimes women would often die and even the child could sometimes die during childbirth, they had protocols in place for these kinds of things. That if, as a woman, if you died during childbirth and your children lived, then your brothers and sisters would adopt your children as their own. So Siddhartha Gautama's mother had an older sister who adopted him as her own child. So his aunt became his stepmother, and she raised him as her own child. It's said that at the time of his birth, there was a certain miracle that happened. I don't think this is actually true, but I'll share it with you because it's in the original teachings, and you'll see this if you read it. What it says is that when he was born, he walked immediately right after he was born, and he took 7 steps. And as he stepped, there were lotus flowers that were blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last life." I don't think this part of the story is true, because oftentimes what happens as stories are handed down from one generation to the other, when someone has done something as significant as a Buddha, people kind of embellish the stories. Well, we don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha, that they've already done something very significant, that we don't need to embellish their life story. But I think that's what occurred, because if this part of the story was true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. The next part of the story is that the father, being the king, was interested to know what his son was going to become. So he summons advisors or fortune tellers to come and advise him what his son was going to become. Well, if your son is born and they're walking right away and lotus flowers are blossoming under their feet and they're talking from day one, from moment one, you don't need anybody to tell you that this child's pretty special, right? But instead, this is what occurred, right? So that's why I don't think that part of the story is true, but it doesn't really matter. So he summoned 108 advisors, that there was these 108 advisors that came to advise him what his son was going to become. And 107 of those advisors shared with him that his son was going to be a great monarch, a great ruler. He was going to rule over his kingdom and expand his kingdom far and wide. So his father was like, "Oh, that's my boy. All right, yeah." Right? But there was this one advisor who came in and he apologized to the king and he says, "Sir, I'm so sorry to share this with you. I heard the other advisors and they're 100% accurate that your son is going to be a great leader, but he's not going to be a monarch. He's not going to rule over your kingdom and he's not going to expand your kingdom. And instead, he's going to be a spiritual leader." And the father didn't like this. So he decides that he's going to sequester his son in the palace and try to kind of woo him into the ways of being a monarch, that he lavished him with all these gifts that you could imagine that a rich royal father could give their son. He was trying to get him hooked to this lifestyle of being a king. So he gives him these great fabrics to wear as clothing. He gives him amazing food. He gives him entertainment. He has beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him at every moment. He gives them everything, jewels and riches, things that rich royal father could give their son. And he was trying to get him hooked to this lifestyle of being a king, that he felt like he could never go off and be a spiritual leader because he wouldn't be able to get this style of life any other way. So for 29 years, he lives his life this way, where he's living in the palace and he's being lavished with all these gifts and living this luxurious lifestyle. At the age of 29, he realizes that he's about to become the king, because during this time frame, you would become the king at the age of 30, and your dad would retire, and now they would be alongside of you to guide you, to help you to understand how to be a better and better king. So at the age of 29, he realizes he's about to become the king, and he hasn't even ever been outside the palace. He hasn't been into the kingdom. So could he rule over these people and guide them as a king if he's never even been in the kingdom? He's been in the palace the entire time. So at the age of 29, without his father knowing and against his wishes, he actually went outside the palace, and he took with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he takes this person with him, and he goes outside the palace. And he has what's called the 4 observations. These 4 observations, he sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and he sees someone who's kind of given up worldly life and trying to understand how to be able to get to enlightenment. So when he sees these observations, he's really impacted by them, and he needs to talk to his royal attendant and ask his attendant what is he's seeing, because he sees this sickly person and he sees this disgruntledness and frustration around this person, and he doesn't understand what's going on. So he asks his royal attendant, he says, "What's going on over there? Why are those people so disgruntled and frustrated?" And he's like, "Oh, that person is sick, and the family isn't going to be able to acquire the basic resources to be able to sustain their life." Right? So this was very impactful to him, because if you grew up for 29 years in a royal palace and that's all you ever knew your entire life, and you were lavished with all these gifts, you'd probably think everybody in the world grew up in that same exact way, just like you. But now he was confronted with this experience where he saw somebody was struggling in life and they were having difficulties to be able to acquire the basic resources to sustain their life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And then he sees an aging person, and it's pretty much the same thing, that there's this disgruntledness and frustration around this person, and he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, "What's going on over there?" And he's like, "Oh, that person's gotten old. They're not going to be able to work and be able to acquire the things that they need in order to be able to sustain their life so easily." Then he sees a dead corpse. In this dead corpse, the family was grieving and sorrowful and sad. And he asked his royal attendant, like, "What's going on over there?" And he's like, "Oh, this person has died, so therefore the family is not going to be able to easily sustain their life because they were one of the people that was helping to sustain the family." And this is very impactful to Siddhartha Gautama, because he lived this life of luxury, not realizing that people were struggling in the world. So then he sees this roaming ascetic, somebody who's off meditating, and he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, "What's that person doing?" And he's like, "Oh, that person over there, that person's trying to figure out all of this. They're trying to figure out why we experience sickness, aging, and death, and why we experience frustration and agitation during these periods of time." So Siddhartha Gautama decides that's what he's interested in doing. He started looking at the kingdom as being full of misery and despair, and he wasn't interested in ruling over misery and despair. So he decides he's going to leave from the royal palace and try to figure out why people experience sickness, aging, and death, because he felt like that would be the real way that he could actually help people. He wasn't interested in ruling over this kingdom. So at the time he was married, and he had a young infant son, and he goes back to the palace, and it's nighttime, and they're actually sleeping. And he decides he's going to leave in the middle of the night. He didn't understand his mind as much as he would by the time he got to enlightenment, but he understood his mind enough that he felt like if he woke his wife and his young child up and said goodbye and hugged them and kissed them and all that kind of stuff, that he wouldn't be able to leave. He felt like his mind wouldn't be able to just leave and go off on this journey to be able to figure out how to help people. So instead of waking them up, he decides to just kind of look in on them and then just kind of leaves in the middle of the night. And he takes with him his favorite horse and his royal attendant, and he leaves out of the royal palace. He eventually gets to a point where he lets his horse go and he lets his royal attendant go, tells him that, "Hey, you've been great. I really appreciate all that you've done, but I don't need you anymore. I'm going to go off on this journey by myself." And he cuts off his hair. At this time, he has this long, beautiful, flowing hair, because this is how they would know that you're a member of the royal family. That today, if there's a certain royalty or monarchy, we might put their pictures all over the kingdom, or we might put their picture on the money, and this is how we know who the king or the queen is. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't have that particular technology. So the way that they knew that you were a member of the royal family is that you would grow this long, beautiful, flowing hair. And if you went out into the kingdom and you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family, because the average person was too busy working in the fields, working in shops, doing all this labored work, and you wouldn't have the time to take care of this long, beautiful, flowing hair. It would get all knotted up and tangled. But the royal family had servants that could comb their hair, brush their hair, shampoo their hair, detangle their hair. They could take care of this long, beautiful, flowing hair. So if you went out into the kingdom with long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family because you had the time to sit back and have people take care of your hair. So by him cutting off this long, beautiful, flowing hair, it's like, I'm never going back. I'm never going back to the royal palace. I'm never going to assume the throne. Because after having grown this hair for 29 years, it would be very challenging for people to think that he was the king if he didn't have this long, beautiful, flowing hair. So he goes off on this journey to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment. So he takes up training with two different teachers. The first teacher, he studies with this person for about a year, and this person is teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce his body with metal implements, and to starve himself. And he does this kind of stuff for about a year. The thought was that if you could cause pain to the physical body and you could overcome that pain in your mind, that you would get to enlightenment. So he was doing all these types of practices. And at the end of 1 year, his teacher came to him and said, hey, you've mastered my teachings. There's nothing else for me to actually teach you. And Siddhartha Gautama realized his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the royal palace. So he left from that teacher and he went to another teacher. And the second teacher essentially was teaching him the same things, hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements, starving himself. So he did this for an entire year. And now this teacher did the same thing. He came to him after that 1 year and said, hey, you've mastered my teachings. There's nothing else for me to teach you. And he realized his mind wasn't peaceful. It wasn't joyful. He hadn't gotten to enlightenment. So he was frustrated with this whole thing, feeling like he had wasted 2 years of his life. And he goes off into the forest by himself and decides he's going to try to train his mind on his own. So when he goes into the forest, he only knows how to do the same things that these people were teaching him to do. So he continues to do these types of things. He took this so far that he was eating just 1 grain of rice per day. This is how he was sustaining his life. And he was on the edge of the forest and he was doing some meditation because that's something that he had understood how to do. And he was meditating, and he was basically skin and bones at this point. He was like on death's doorstep, that he was only eating 1 grain of rice for so long that his body was, basically malnourished, and he was unable to be able to potentially sustain his life for much longer. So there was this young daughter and this mother who come by and they see the Buddha. And he's not a Buddha yet. He's still training his mind, but they see Siddhartha Gautama sitting there on the edge of the forest meditating, and he's on death's doorstep, and they can tell that this person is about to die. And they beg and plead with him to eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice because he feels like he's given up on the path to enlightenment, because everything that he understood from before was that he had to disparage the body in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So he reluctantly accepts this rice, and he starts to eat this rice. And he realizes in this moment that there's this middle way, that when he was in the palace, that he was living this life of luxury. He had all the pleasures that you could imagine. But when he left from the royal palace, he swung all the way to the other side, where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realized that none of these two extremes actually produces enlightenment. So this is where he starts coming up with what's called the middle way, where he starts eating in moderation and he starts doing things in moderation. And ultimately, over the next 4 years, he figures out how to get to enlightenment. It was a total of 6 years, but those next 4 years were really impactful for him because he started to now train the mind instead of disparaging the body. So over this 4-year period, a total of 6, he figures out how to get to enlightenment, and he knows he's enlightened because his mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. He doesn't experience discontent feelings. All that anger, sadness, frustration, and others completely eliminated from the mind. He notices that his mind's completely focused, concentrated. He has clarity and deep memory. So he realizes that his teachings are very different than anything that anybody else was teaching at the time. So he was considering teaching, but he wasn't sure whether the world was ready to be able to learn these teachings or not, because it was so vastly different than what everyone else was teaching, because they were teaching to hang themselves upside down from trees and things like this. So he goes and he hangs out at this tree in northeast India. and he hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks, contemplating whether or not he should actually share his teachings or not. So ultimately, he does decide that he's going to share his teachings. And he goes back to the place where he was studying with those first 2 teachers. He travels back there and he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these 5 people, they start laughing at him. They joke him and mock him because they saw him coming and he had meat on his bones. He was bright and vibrant and cheerful. And to them, in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you had to be disparaging the physical body. So when they saw this bright, joyful, cheerful, healthy-looking person coming towards them, they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. So they start joking him and mocking him and degrading him. But by the time you get to enlightenment, those things don't affect your mind. Your mind is completely peaceful and joyful. It doesn't matter if somebody says something like that, you wouldn't be affected by it. So he just comes over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground and he takes his hand and he touches the earth. And when he touches the earth, he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. When he touched the earth, there was these animals that came to where he was at. So there were birds and squirrels and rabbits and lizards and snakes and all these other animals that came to where he was at. And these 5 people, seeing what he had just did, they were like, okay, you've got my attention. What do you have to share? And they sat down and he shares what's called the 4 Noble Truths. In 4 simple statements, he explains the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And the way that the teachings of a Buddha work is that they're independently verifiable, that they're not based in belief. So in that particular talk, in that discourse, the students were able to see that he had indeed figured out how to get to enlightenment. Because in those 4 simple statements, he explained to them what is the problem in their mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. The problem that he discovered is that the mind is discontent. It experiences anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, all those feelings. That's a problem for the unenlightened mind, because when your mind's all shaken up like that, you can't make wise decisions, and it produces unwholesome results for you in your day-to-day life. The cause of that problem, which is the 2nd Noble Truth, is craving, desire, attachment. The mind has longing, yearning, and it chases after the objects of its affection. It's craving for things to be permanent, when in reality, everything around you is impermanent. It's constantly changing. With the mind's craving for permanence, if the mind gets what it wants, it experiences happiness, excitement, elation, some pleasant feeling. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. The elimination of this is that if you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection, you can eliminate the discontentedness. And the 4th Noble Truth is the way to accomplish that is the Eightfold Path. That's the complete, perfect plan that's going to guide you in how to actually transform your mind. So if a teacher walks you through these 4 Noble Truths, it usually takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to teach that. If a teacher walks you through that and you independently verify it, you can see for yourself that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. That has nothing to do with disparaging the body. It has nothing to do with the outside world, external circumstances. That's not what's causing the discontentedness. So these first 5 students could see that, and they could independently verify it through their own experience that it was their own mind that was causing these feelings. So they became the first 5 students. And from that point forward, as Siddhartha Gautama taught from the age of 35 until he died at the age of 80, this 45-year period, there were countless people that were getting to enlightenment. And they knew that they were able to get to enlightenment because they could see with the quality of their mind that it was constantly improving and that their life was gradually improving as well. So he does die at the age of 80. He ends up dying from old age. You'll hear sometimes people tell you that the Buddha died from eating a poisonous sandwich, that he was at a party and there was a poisonous sandwich on the table, and that he knew it was a poisonous sandwich and he didn't want anybody else to eat the poisonous sandwich, so he ate it instead. So basically he committed suicide, right? This is not true. This is not in the original text. This is what people say, but it's not true. Because think about it. You're not a Buddha. You're not as wise as a Buddha. But if you were at a party and you saw a poisonous sandwich on a table and you weren't interested in other people eating that poisonous sandwich, what would you do with it? You'd probably throw it away, right? You might even bury it so that nobody would ever get access to this poisonous sandwich. So Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he didn't eat this poisonous sandwich. There was no such thing. Instead, he actually died of old age. The stomach lining of his stomach actually pulled away from the body. And you can see it in this book series that I share, that it explains exactly how he actually died. So he ends up dying from old age. The body just basically gives out. But during this period of time of 45 years, he teaches extensively, and countless people get to enlightenment. And then shortly after his death, they end up preserving his teachings in such a way that countless more people got to enlightenment after his death. These are the three criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after that person's death. So you can get to enlightenment, but you won't be a Buddha at that point. A Buddha is very rare in the world. We refer to this type of person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because by the time they get to enlightenment, they don't have any extra baggage or anything like that. They spend the rest of their life illuminating the path, making it very clear for others about how to actually get to this enlightened mental state. Where the average person who gets to enlightenment, they'll still have a little bit of extra things in their mind, like maybe a certain meditation that they're doing that didn't really contribute to their enlightenment, but they're actually doing that particular meditation even though it didn't contribute to their enlightenment. Where a person who gets to enlightenment by themselves as a Buddha, if they try a certain meditation and it's working to improve the condition of their mind, they know that that's the path to enlightenment. But if they try a certain meditation and it's not working to improve the condition of their mind, they will discard it, so that by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment. And then they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path, making it very clear for people of how to actually get to enlightenment. So this is the life story of this individual who we refer to as the Buddha. He was born in 563 BC. He died in 483 BCE, and that was 2,500 years ago. It's very rare that a Buddha will exist in the world. Sometimes people will tell you that everybody is a Buddha, but the Buddha never actually taught that. He explained how rare it is that this type of individual that meets these three criteria actually exists in the world. So he ultimately realized that what was causing the struggles with sickness, aging, and death wasn't the fact that you just didn't have the resources that you needed in order to be able to sustain your life. That's not what's causing the difficulties and struggles in terms of the discontentedness in the mind. What's causing the discontentedness during a period of time of sickness is that the mind is craving permanent health. If you crave permanent health and your mind is longing, yearning for it, that means you can only be happy when this body is healthy. But this body can't be permanently healthy. It is impossible because this body is impermanent. So if you crave permanent health, when you experience sickness, you will experience frustration or agitation or some other discontent feeling. And even with sickness, when you're at home and maybe your mind is longing, yearning to go outside, maybe you want to go ride your bike, or you want to go to the gym, or you want to go to work and see your friends or what have you, and you're at home and you can't go out, you're going to be upset. You're going to be frustrated because your mind is longing, yearning for that permanence and wanting that particular thing. So it's the craving for permanent health that is causing the discontentedness during sickness or aging. When the body is aging, this is just impermanence. That's all that is. But if you're craving permanent youthfulness, when you're experiencing aging, you'll have difficulties and struggles with that. You'll look in the mirror and you'll see a wrinkle, or you'll see a gray hair, or you'll start losing your hair, or you'll start getting a little bit extra weight, or maybe a lot of extra weight here and there. And as this body is changing, if you're craving permanence of this physical body, now as it's aging and you can't move around as easily, it's not so easy for you to do all the things that you did when you were younger, you'll experience frustration and agitation because your mind is craving permanence of this body, when in reality, this body is not permanent. or at death, when you're experiencing grief and sorrow or sadness because someone's died, or if you're getting close to death and you're noticing that you're struggling with that, it's not because of love. It's because the mind's craving permanence, that the mind wants grandma and grandpa to be permanent, or mom or dad, or brothers and sisters. The mind's holding on and craving permanence. And as long as this person is alive, the mind's getting what it wants. But when they experience death, the mind's experienced this impermanence, this change, and the mind doesn't like that. So one of the ways to say this is that the unenlightened mind craves permanence. Or another way to say that is that the mind does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change. When things are changing in your life, that's a real difficult time. That's a real struggle for the mind. And death is one of the biggest changes that you can experience in life. So you can look at your life and verify this, because when you're changing things in your life, that's where the real difficulties and struggles are. Like if you're changing jobs, or you're changing living locations, or your relationships are changing, those have been some of the biggest challenges in your day-to-day life. So it's whenever the mind is experiencing change that the mind really struggles with this. And the Buddha figured this out as part of the journey to enlightenment, and he figured out how to train the mind where it's understanding of impermanence and it's not craving this permanence. And you can train your mind to get to the point where you're not holding on and craving permanence, because things are impermanent. Things are going to be constantly changing in the world around you. There isn't a permanent thing in this material world. Things are going to be constantly changing at all times. So the Buddha figured out that the sickness, aging, and death, the reason why people struggle with that, whether it's your own sickness, aging, or death, or others, is that the mind is craving permanence. But you can change this. You can transform that. And that's what his teachings actually help you to be able to do. So I'm just going to stop here and see if you guys have questions on the life story of the Buddha. Is there anything you guys would like to ask? Remember, we have microphones there. We have some up here. And then online, you guys can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom electronically and ask any questions that way. Anybody have any questions? Diego, you have a question? Yeah.
So, David,
Mm-hmm.
so Gotama was not the first Buddha, and neither the last one. By his prophecy, we kind of have a Buddha living between us. So I would like to understand a little bit more. The previous Buddha, they didn't left some teachings that was like this, also middle way, and also about this new Buddha. This is gonna change or something about the Buddhism, or you're gonna have some difference? Like how can this be together, the previous one with the new one?
Sure. So this is the only conflict that you will ever see throughout the teachings that have been captured in the Pali Canon. A Buddha doesn't teach with any conflicts whatsoever. Their teachings are 100% in sync. But when people document them and they're handed down over countless generations, there can be changes and modifications that people make. So if you read the totality of the teachings of the Buddha, you'll see this one particular conflict, that there's some places in the original text where it talks about previous Buddhas having existed prior to Gotama Buddha. But you'll also see a place in the original text where the Buddha says that he is the discoverer, the declarer, the originator of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before him, meaning there weren't any Buddhas prior to him. So you'll see this one conflict. So while people ask this question frequently, and it's always interesting to talk about, we don't know 100% whether there were Buddhas prior to him or not. Some people would tell you there were, some people would tell you there weren't. It really doesn't matter, even though it's interesting to talk about, it really doesn't matter, because the teachings of a Buddha that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment, it's actually the same teachings. Every Buddha will have exactly the same teachings. That what they're doing is they're describing the natural laws. They're describing these natural laws that are apparent to all of us once you learn them and you understand them. A Buddha figures out what these natural laws are on their own, and then they will actually explain them to other people so other people can independently verify them. So Siddhartha Gautama, we have a record of his teachings, and we know that he existed. And as you learn and practice his teachings, you'll see that they actually work, helping you to get to enlightenment. But if there were Buddhas prior to him, we don't have any record of their teachings and what they taught, but I know that they would have taught exactly the same thing because it's the natural laws. So whether they did exist or they didn't exist, we don't know, and it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if your mind is unenlightened, you need to learn the teachings and get to enlightenment. If there's a new Buddha that comes into the world, their teachings would be the same. They would maybe have updated analogies and things like that, where like the Buddha used farming and things like this to talk about his teachings, where today we might talk about mobile phones and cars and airplanes and things like this, where they used farming analogies during his lifetime, because those are things that people would have understood during his lifetime, where today it would be the same exact teachings, but that individual would need to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They would then need to dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their teachings, and countless people would get to enlightenment through that person's teachings. And then they would need to preserve their teachings so that other people could get to enlightenment after their death. But an individual who's a Buddha, they don't go out into the world looking for fame or fortune or trying to get people to recognize that they're an actual Buddha. If they're wise enough to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, they would also be wise enough to start sharing their teachings and start helping people get to enlightenment without people knowing that they're an actual Buddha. Because one of the things that a Buddha has as one of their main powers, so to speak, is that people actually don't know that they're a Buddha. And by people not knowing that they're a Buddha, this one power that they have, which is to observe the quality of their students' mind, they can see the pollutions of the mind in their students, and then they can offer them teachings to be able to help them to be able to get to enlightenment. So a Buddha is actually using that in order to be able to help countless people to get to enlightenment, because they can observe the quality of their students' mind and then help them with teachings. Whereas if everybody knew who a Buddha was, let's just say there's like some outward characteristic. Let's just say there's like a mole in a certain place, and we know that, that's a Buddha for sure, right? Well, then everyone would be on their best behavior whenever they're around that person, right? And now the Buddha wouldn't be able to see the quality of their students' mind to be able to help them to be able to then provide teachings. So a Buddha isn't interested in people knowing that they're an actual Buddha. They're not going to go out on the 5 o'clock news and declare that they're an actual Buddha. Instead, they're just going to teach and share their teachings, because what they're interested in is many people getting to enlightenment. Because one of the best ways to preserve your teachings as a Buddha is for countless people to get to enlightenment. Because if people get to enlightenment, whatever they took to be able to get to enlightenment, they will always remember that. They will never forget those teachings. So while we will have books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts and things like that, if there was a Buddha in the world today, that isn't as powerful as someone actually getting to enlightenment. If someone actually gets to enlightenment, now the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment was within their mind, and now they're able to teach it to other people. So a Buddha would be more interested in seeing people get to enlightenment. They wouldn't be interested in other people knowing that they're an actual Buddha, because then they can preserve this quality to be able to help people to be able to get to enlightenment. I thought the question you were going to ask is one that people often ask, is they say, did the Buddha ever go back to his family? Did he ever go back to see his wife and his son again? Does anybody have that question? Would you guys like to know the answer to that? Yeah. So he ends up going back to where he was in the royal palace and where he grew up. His wife ends up ordaining with him and becomes a student. His son ends up ordaining with him and becoming a student. His stepmother, his aunt, becomes a student of his. So many people came from the royal family to actually be a student that his father actually came to him and begged and pleaded with him to stop ordaining people from the royal family, because his father was attached to the royal family. He thought that the royal family was going to fall apart if he kept ordaining people. And ultimately it did, of course, right? That royal family no longer exists, right? Because it was impermanent. But the father was holding on and craving permanence. So he begged and pleaded with the Buddha to stop ordaining people from the royal family. So from that point, the Buddha implemented some guidance that if you would like to become ordained, you had to have the approval of your family. So if you were at home living with mom and dad, they would have to approve that you could ordain with him. Or if you were married, you would need to have your wife or your husband's approval or your children's approval to be able to ordain in order to come learn with him. So he did go back to his family. Sometimes people think that he abandoned his family and he never went back to his family. And they think that this is the way that you're going to get to enlightenment. You don't have to leave your family in order to get to enlightenment. You can live a household life. You can have a life partner. You can live with other people. You don't have to go off into the forest. That's what a Buddha does. They go off by themselves and they figure out how to be able to get to enlightenment on their own. But for you, you can live the current life that you have. You're just going to need to prioritize training your mind and finding ways to be able to get the teachings that you need in order to be able to train your mind. And I suggest you guys start with this first book. This is the best place to start. You can actually get this for free. You can download it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. So that's the best place to get started. And you can learn in this program and other programs as well. So the Buddha did spend time with his family, interacted with them. They were actually getting to enlightenment. You can see in the original text that his wife got to enlightenment, his son got to enlightenment, his aunt got to enlightenment, and many other people around him was getting to enlightenment. Yep. Any other questions? Yeah. You have a question, Bart?
Thanks. I just have a question about the teachings of the Buddha and how they were passed down. Basically, when were they? Well, first of all, who wrote the Pali Canon? How did these become kind of documented in this one collective text? And how do we know they're really the original teachings and they haven't been altered or changed in certain ways?
Sure. So by the time the Buddha died, there were countless people that had gotten to enlightenment. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll never forget what it took for you to get to enlightenment. It's like you've upgraded the operating system in your mind, and that wisdom is imprinted in your mind. You know exactly what it took for you to get to the enlightened mental state. So by the time he died, there were countless people that had gotten to enlightenment. But 500 of them got together shortly after his death, within the first 3 to 6 months, and they start to talk about documenting his teachings. Because the technology to write things down didn't exist during his lifetime. It actually existed in China, but it hadn't made its way to that region of the world yet. Just like technology today slowly rolls throughout the world, it was even slower back then. And you might not see writing things down as technology, but 2,500 years ago, that was technology to be able to write things down. So by the time he had died, that technology did make its way to that region of the world. So these 500 people got together and they all agreed on what it was that he actually taught. And they started to document his teachings and write this down. So we've had 2,500 years of history. We refer to this as the Pali Canon because the version that we have, which dates back to about 12 to 1,300 years ago, is in the Pali language. So we know that there was some documentation prior to that they started right after his death, and that took us all the way to the point where we now see the Pali Canon, that the Pali Canon originates about 1,200 to 1,300 years ago in the Pali language. So it would be naive of us to think that there was a document that was created 2,500 years ago and it hasn't changed that entire time, because we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that of course this document has changed. The natural laws haven't changed. Those are the same. But the documents and people's memories and their thoughts about the teachings, that has all changed. So we know that what's in the Pali Canon, not everything in there is what the Buddha actually taught. But also not everything the Buddha taught is actually in the Pali Canon too. So while it's the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings, it's not everything he taught. And not everything that's in there is actually from him. So the way that you cut through that impermanence to be able to know what's true and false is you don't believe any of it. When you're reading these books, when you're learning from a teacher like me, you don't believe anything. You need to be able to learn, investigate, and examine the teachings, whether they're in written form or otherwise. You then reflect on those teachings to verify if they're true or false, and you can independently verify it. And then you practice it. You integrate it into your day-to-day life, training your mind through those teachings. And that's where you'll cultivate the wisdom to know what's true and what's false. So for example, like the universal truth of impermanence, you've learned that with me before, right? You see how I walk you through the learning, the reflection, and the practice. The same thing with meditation and all these other things that we teach you. You can't believe any of it. You need to be able to learn it, reflect on it, and practice it. And as your mind's becoming more and more peaceful, more and more joyful, you see your relationships are improving, you'll know that these are the teachings that are actually leading to your enlightenment in this collection of teachings. So that's how you cut through that impermanence, because we know it's happened. It's just a matter of making sure you cut through it. And the Buddha taught this too. He taught about how his teachings were going to be changed over time. Because you asked about a new Buddha. He talked about how his teachings would go through these 500-year cycles, and his teachings would slowly deteriorate over time. And he knew this, and he taught about how to maintain his teachings in as best condition as possible, fully knowing that they were going to deteriorate. And then there would be a new Buddha that would bring them back into the world and restore them in such a way that countless people could get to enlightenment. So this is where they originate from, and this is how you cut through that impermanence that we know that's happened. Because there's these natural laws, and then there's all these materials that are pointing to the natural laws, but you need to learn, reflect, and practice to see the truth for yourself of what are those natural laws. And that's where you cultivate wisdom, and that's what it means to awaken or to be awake, is to cultivate wisdom of these natural laws so that you know the truth and you can see what is true and false about these natural laws. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. I don't see any online either. So what I'll do then, I'll just end by saying thank you to everybody. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. If you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for you guys to do that. Today was just a life story of the Buddha, so not really anything tangible that you can go out into the world and start transforming your mind with. But nonetheless, it's an interesting story to know, because you can see that hanging yourself upside down from trees and laying on beds of nails, disparaging the body, doesn't produce enlightenment. Because you can go to some places today where when you're meditating and your hips hurting or your knees hurting, they'll say, oh, just breathe through it. Right? You can see that that's unwise. The Buddha taught that you're not disparaging the physical body in order to get to enlightenment, right? If your mind is just experiencing pain, how could you ever train your mind to get to enlightenment, right? So this is helpful as part of his life story. So the last thing I'll share with you guys here as part of this is this quote that I usually share, is no one ever said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Learning Gotama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha will ensure that life is not tough. So this difficult human existence that you experience in the unenlightened state, where you're having stress and anxiety and guilt and shame and fear and anger and all these other feelings, that's just because the mind lacks wisdom. It's untrained. So life, nobody ever said it was easy, but it's not supposed to be tough either. Learning and practicing these teachings, training your mind and cultivating wisdom, it's not easy, but it's going to ensure that your life is not tough, because you can train your mind to get to the point where it's completely at ease. So there's options for you to be able to learn that. Like I mentioned, there's the book, there's classes, courses, retreats. You can see this on the bulletin board over there. You can also see our website. You'll see options of being able to learn and practice the teachings. Everything's available for you at no cost, whether it's the learning materials of books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, whether it's personal guidance, classes, courses, retreats. If you're interested in experiencing this peaceful and joyful mental state, there's help for you. You just need to decide you're done with the anger. You're done with the frustration. You're done with the broken relationships. You don't like this. You don't enjoy that feeling any longer, and you would like something better for your life. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is this better way of life. There's not rules and commandments. It's not belief. It's not rituals and ceremonies. It's about doing this inner work of growth and development, becoming a better and better individual. It's essentially a self-help program. And there's a teacher that's going to serve as a tour guide, pointing out for you the things that you need to be able to learn and understand. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future events. Take care and be well. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.